Welcome to Unscripted OnSpot. Our guest today is Muller, who is the spokesperson for the South African Nuclear Build Program, as well as the MD of NuEnergy Developments. Welcome, Des.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on your program.
It's such a pleasure. I think let's get into the deep of things. One is you're an interesting, well-faceted, well-rounded man, particularly in energy, not only in the nuclear space, but on energy in generic. And I wanted to understand your background. Who are you? Where you come from? How did you end up in the energy space? And I know you have other interesting facets of your life, which is the socio-economic, work that you do, as well as foundation work that you've been doing during COVID. So just take us through that explorative journey.
Okay, just from an energy perspective, my power generation career started really as a student with the construction of the coal build program that South Africa has been working on in the 20th century, starting at Duva. And I've managed to work through all the different coal-fired power stations right up to Majuba. And that's when we kind of stopped the building of coal-fired power plants here in South Africa. And I needed to start looking at where the direction is going to go in the energy sector. I looked abroad as well at the IPP program, the gas to power program, and then later on the renewable energy program started coming forward. And I got involved very much in South Africa with the development of those programs. So bringing in gas to power, working with government and the industry on the IPP program, and then later on looking at from an industrial point of view, from a development point of view, the renewable energy industry, and starting to drive that through the industry. And it's always been an industry focus for me.
Yes.
To try and get the industry behind these opportunities, to make sure that the industry is ready and supportive of these new developments and these new transitions that we are seeing in South Africa. Then around 2007, the nuclear build program came onto the energy mix, and it was a natural progression for me, being in the construction and engineering sector, to make sure that the industry is aligned to that. So we established good nuclear construction capabilities and participated in the tendering process going forward.
So you are in a generalist term, a well-rounded power as well as energy, fundi.
Yes.
In a way, you are well-rounded. You're not just only focused on a specific. You are a power generation.
Yes.
Power station fundi in a sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm technology agnostic.
Yeah.
For me, what makes sense for South Africa, and we've got a wealth of technologies that we can address our energy security, our environmental sustainability with, and affordability of energy. So I support very much a balanced energy portfolio for South Africa, not a specific technology. And we need to look at the wealth of technologies that we have available to South Africa to actually develop that.
So you are a balanced energy mix person, as a sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every technology makes a lot of sense for South Africa when applied correctly. Every watt on the grid is a good watt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's encouraging to know, but coming back now, let's take it back to the origins. I mean, you grew up in South Africa. You're a South African bona fide, South African family. What informed you growing up in a South African context to actually even identify opportunities coming up to becoming where you are and who you are today, a highly rounded man and a fundi in energy in terms of your expertise? I have deep respect for you. We've worked for several years together.
Yes, that's right.
And it's been an encouraging journey when you see South Africans very much more passionate about the development of South Africa. So just take us through that journey a bit, where you come from.
Look, I grew up, I was born in Orkney.
Amazing. Yeah.
And we moved up to Johannesburg when we were small, still in primary school.
Yeah.
So I was very much educated here in
So you're a
Africa.
Joburg boy.
Yeah, back in Joburg. And one of the things that I was quite passionate about is doing something effective for South Africa. How do we change the conditions? How do we just sit and complain about it, or do we do something about changing and improving the conditions that we are not comfortable with?
Yes.
And I looked into a lot of technologies and ideas. Being educated in the engineering sector does give one an understanding that there are solutions and there are practical solutions, and we can get our act together. I don't know why South Africa is struggling to catch up and deal with the energy situation in South Africa. There is technology, there is known technology. There are people that can actually add value to that and fix these situations. We don't necessarily have to be in the situation for too long, and we can transform it. Unfortunately, we've got ourselves into a bit of a hole, but what I'm really interested in is how do we actually get out of that situation? And yes, we may have to live with it for another decade, because there aren't real quick fixes to the problems that we've actually created for ourselves over the last 2 decades. So South Africa needs to make the decision, put together a very good strategy on how we're going to get out of the situation. And I want to make sure that the industry is behind it, that we create jobs, that we create energy that is affordable, that is sustainable from an environmental point of view, and it deals mostly important with energy security. Energy security, I think all South Africans can agree, is very, very important. Right now, South Africans don't give a damn how clean that watt is or how dirty that watt is. They just want electricity in their homes. And I think that's essentially what we need to start focusing on right now. As we've seen in Europe, Europe has gone back to coal. Europe has gone back to gas. Europe has gone back to oil. They don't really have much of a choice. You either have no electricity or you have some electricity. And I think today we need to start looking at getting energy security together again so our economy can grow and employment can actually be brought up to spec again.
I think you've touched on some very key pertinent issues and particular aspects, because there is a lack in South Africa of people to present a rounded, very focused view on what is potentially possible. And I want us to expand a bit, maybe when we come back after the break, on the issue of energy balance, energy mixed, in terms of what can be done practically in South Africa, given the fact that we're sitting with a crisis, and this crisis is almost plunging the economy. We are told that we're losing almost $1 billion every time there is a flick of a switch in terms of load shedding, which means over a period of a whole day, if you multiply that load shedding by the day, every day 1 billion plus on just fixed income on opportunities is lost. And Eskom's on the other side is losing its own revenue. What can be done? You come from power stations build programs where you know what needs to be done in building power stations. So after the break when we come back.
Okay, thank you.
Let's talk about the balanced energy mixed from a South African context. Globally, when you talk about balanced energy mix, a lot of it, they're talking about different sources. But at a South African level, balanced energy mix means a lot of things and many things for many people. But from your expertise point of view, as a Fundi, can you take us through the educational element of it? What does balanced energy mix from a South African point of view, and how has it been applied? We know South Africa has 40%, has actually 40, in terms of 40,000 megawatts, which is coal-based, fleet, which makes the primary energy in a South African context. There is the introduction of renewables, as well as now there is the moving away from coal itself, introducing a much more, mix of the renewables, and then bringing even in gas into the whole space. What does balanced energy mix mean?
All right. Historically, we used the coal that we had in the ground to generate electricity, which is what the rest of the world was doing. South Africa was enriched with coal, and we used that to grow our economy, expand our industries, and we became a significant player on the global markets because of the abundance of energy that we had in South Africa. Today, the world is moving away from coal, and we're looking at a decommissioning program. We're also looking at aging assets. So we can't rely on the generation assets that we built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so forth. We need to start looking at replacing them because they're becoming more and more unreliable, which is really driving some of the load shedding that we're seeing today. So we're kind of forced into this transition at a time when the world wants to go into cleaner energies. And we have the choice of these cleaner energies, and they've matured over the last decade quite significantly. So we have a tremendous amount of choices available to us. Like, for example, the renewable energy program with wind and solar, that has been going on for quite some time, and that is really well entrenched into our economy and in our power generation industry. So what we got to look at is how do we actually balance the intermittency of renewables? So renewables is there, it is weather dependent, but we need to obviously balance that intermittency.
So when you say intimacy, you means that as and when available, you know?
Correct, yes. So when the wind is not blowing or when the sun is not shining, it's not there, you know? And one cannot run an industrial economy like South Africa on this type of intermittency or unreliable energy sources. So one's got to blend it with other technologies, like, for example, gas, like nuclear as well, like hydro. Hydro is a little bit more reliable, especially when you can get hydro from your neighboring countries. They've got great hydro resources. South Africa is not necessarily blessed with the biggest hydro resources.
You mean the dams?
The dams
that
yes.
are using power generation.
That's correct, yes. So we're not blessed with it, but we can definitely get it from our neighboring countries. Whether we get it from the DRC in the Grand Inga, that's a different story. I mean, that's a long distance away.
That's kilometers, thousands of kilometers.
Yeah, 4,500 kilometers away, but something a little bit closer. There's some big resources available. We can start looking at that. And the ideal balanced energy mix that South Africa can participate in is split simply into three portions. A 1/3 of fossil energy, which is coal and gas. Okay, so that is a
so we have coal
portion.
Power stations in South Africa.
Yeah, coal power stations will be around for the next bunch of years, going up to 2050, with the Kusile and the Medupi that we've just now built. They're going to be around for quite a while. We can have 1/3 of our energy portfolio dedicated to coal and gas, fossil fuels, 1/3 to renewables and hydro. That would be solar, wind, and hydro, and 1/3 of it to nuclear. And that would be a balanced energy mix that will deal with environmental sustainability, it will deal with energy security, and it will provide you with an affordable energy tariff here in South Africa. And affordability is a big issue, especially in today's economy.
But you painted a great picture, but there are challenges to it. The IRP says yes, 1/3, base load, 1/3 a mix of, gas as well as the other, fossil fuels, and then the 1/3 which is solar, wind, and the other alternative energies. But we are not sitting with that ideal scenario right now, whereby you're having that balanced energy mix implemented. You have two groups currently in South Africa. One is the pro-fossil fuel, coal, and then the pro-nuclear, and then you have the anti-coal, which is now the green energy, the renewables, as well as the intermittent alternative sources. How come we're not moving in tandem from a country point of view? Where would you say there are issues relating to our policy implementation?
Look, I think vested interests in various technologies does play a very big role. You know, certain technologies can deliver energy security.
Absolutely.
They can deliver access to affordable electricity, and they can also deliver environmental sustainability. So nuclear energy would deal or deliver all three of those points. Other technologies, like for example coal, doesn't really deal with or deliver environmental sustainability. Renewables, on the other hand, does, but it doesn't provide energy security. As we've seen, we've invested quite a lot of money and effort into renewable energy, and we're still deep in load shedding here in South Africa. Sure, it's not only renewable energy's fault, but a lot of the assets are getting a bit tired in South Africa. The maintenance is not happening as scheduled. Eskom is fixing it up. Eskom definitely needs to confront the situation and deal with it. But I think it's something that we've got to start putting together a very good plan and a very good strategy that is workable, and not something that is built based on ideologies or vested interests. We need to put something together that is quite tangible and can fix our energy security situation within the next decade.
Absolutely.
We're not going to do it overnight, but if we can see that there is something that we can actually do that is going to fix the situation and load shedding will go away by 2030, then I think everybody will feel a little bit more comfortable.
South Africans are currently irritated, quite very angry, and based on social media comments that we've been observing and looking at it, they have completely given up hope on what the current leadership of Eskom can deliver. In your view, what should be done within Eskom as the primary energy supplier to make sure that we come out of load shedding? You've built power stations, you should know, and what can the country do to make sure that we end this crisis of power, load shedding, before we even talk about what can be done on the future basis to introduce alternative energy?
Look, South Africa's got a bit of history, and back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the availability of our coal fleet was around about 90%. And that means that they perform 90% of the year. And they have their outages and they have their failures and things like that. But just generally, 90% of the year, the power plants are available. Today, we're looking at that number sitting at about 60%.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is not necessarily an international best practices study.
Yeah, 60% is way below.
Yeah. So 80%, 75%, even 90% is still the current standard on the international markets. There's no reason why we cannot get to that point. And what we need to do is establish a very good regime. We need to obviously take with what we have at the moment. We can't kind of say, okay, fine, let's decommission all the coal, so let's shut down all the coal-fired stations, and we will find an alternative solution to that. You can't do it. That is reckless and that is irresponsible for our economy and the livelihoods of South Africans. So what we need to do is to say, right, take what we've got and let us get it to perform a lot better. And that will be the fastest way to deal with the risk mitigation challenges that the DMRE wants to deal with.
Yeah.
We can probably get that additional 4,000, 6,000 megawatts that everybody's looking for with a proper operations and maintenance program that will keep the availability of these plants and raise that up to international best practices.
So you now appointed, for instance, you get a call, we like to pick your ideas, but to test it, we're going to give you a year to turn Eskom around. You're going to be the CEO. Andre de Reuters has been promoted to undertake a new company in the public sector where he'll be running green energy projects.
Yes.
In terms of building new power build. But now we want an interim CEO. What would you do given the current complexity of Eskom now as a CEO? You're an energy fundi. You've been in the power stations. What would you do to turn around the current scenario and within 12 months deliver about results?
I'll deal with the most important issue at the moment: get additional power on the grid as soon as possible.
Additional power meaning?
Additional megawatts on the grid. And that could be just upscaling the reliability on your existing fleet. Address the existing fleet. There's a lot of units that have been damaged, shut down, closed down for years.
Yeah.
Let's see how we can actually rebuild them.
Yes.
Is it profitable to rebuild them? Can we do it within a 2-year period?
Can they be rebuilt?
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But is it affordable, or does it make economic sense to rebuild some of these units that have been damaged? I think Duva's been down for about 5 years or something like that. But we need to address what we have at the moment. The quickest to market is really upscaling the reliability and the availability of our existing coal fleet. Renewables is installed, it is working, it is weather-dependent technology, but it is definitely helping the situation. I would also start looking at a gas-to-power program.
Okay.
We're starting to see a lot of gas being developed in Southern Africa, and access to natural gas is something that South Africa can look forward to within the next 5 years. And I would get that, the gas to power program. I would say, for example, look at the diesel peakers that we've installed. How do we actually upgrade them into a combined cycle technology, run them on natural gas? I think that would have been a better solution than bringing the car power ships into the
speaking of that, Eskom currently has actually converted some of its power stations to do a dual fuel, which is diesel and then gasified, as well as using LNG, liquefied natural gas.
Yes.
So there is capacity already available.
Yes.
But why are we not seeing that extra capacity? And I believe it's about 2,000 megawatts of such plants that are available. Why are we not seeing that capacity getting into the grid? Are they using it for emergency, or they have just parked it as well?
Well, they all run on diesel at the moment.
All right.
And diesel is a very expensive commodity, and it's basically going volatile at the moment.
Speculative now.
So whether you need to run it or not, it's going to be something at a big cost to Eskom. And even that big cost is there, we're still running those assets full blast to actually maintain the situation here in South Africa with regards to energy security. But there isn't really an overnight solution on something like this. This is something that we need to plan properly, make sure that there's no opposition to it, get it established responsibly.
Meaning of repairing the power plants?
Yeah. Getting the power plants cleaned up, make sure the emissions are good enough, and we'll start getting them running in top performance. Make sure that they do run and operate standardly, and reliably as well.
Yeah.
And that will come through a very good operations and maintenance regime, which Eskom is well within capable to achieve something like that.
So in 12 months, you can turn around the ship. You can bring in additional capacity, say 5,000 megawatts of emergency power can be recovered.
Yes.
In the existing coal fleet, as well as the
I wouldn't
mix of
I wouldn't say 12
diesel
months, but definitely within a period of 2 years, you would see a big difference, because there's quite a lot of damage that one needs to fix. You need to start working with the personnel of Eskom, not replacing them and bringing in international people. Yes, we will probably need to bring in international people, but train the existing resources that Eskom has, get the technology in, and start fixing up and running these power stations according to the international standards.
Okay, coming back again, and then looking at now the international trends all over the world. Everybody is moving back into coal, they are moving back into gas, and they are ramping up their nuclear assets. It's a general trend, especially since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war. We have seen now Europe going back into major utilization of gas and major reliance on nuclear. But there is no talk in any of the regions globally. Even India, by the way, I just read a report that India has now mandated on a mandate. They've created something called an emergency law that says all power stations that were previously closed due to inefficiencies, such as your coal power stations, must be reopened due to the fact that they need additional power because there is a scarce power and there is an energy crisis in India. Given the fact that the post-COVID, people have come back to industrial level, they are back in work, and then again there is now a surging demand in terms of household demand for electricity because people are now working at home. The utilization of your air conditioning, technology and everything is draining up the energy into the grid. But we are not seeing the same thinking when you come to South Africa. Everybody's still hell-bent on saying destroy current Eskom coal, completely don't even talk about nuclear, but yet there is no any other solution. Wind and solar works on a microgrid. As an energy expert, we've studied the science of it. We know what can be applicable where. On a rooftop level, you can have your 8-hour top max, in terms of your energy recovery on your rooftop level. But beyond that, in terms of industrial scale, you cannot be reliant at all in terms of transmission level on anything to do with the small modular, wind or solar solutions that we currently have. They only work for small microgrids for households. Globally, everybody is going back into coal and nuclear and gas. Why is it that South Africa is lagging behind? And what could be the drivers? Is it political? Is it interferences? Is it global interests? What in your view is the problem?
Look, I definitely feel the DMRE has the responsibility of guaranteeing energy security for South Africa. Sure, Eskom gets blamed a lot, but energy planning and future energy mixes in South Africa solely relies in the responsibility of the DMRE. The DMRE obviously needs to please all the players. There's been a very big investment in international investment in renewable energy over the last decade.
Yes.
That has been fantastic. It is not necessarily a solution that is going to deliver to energy security. You can roll out as much renewable energy as you like, as long as you've got energy security from baseload power, either coming from hydro, bit of gas, nuclear, and coal, definitely. But we don't have the luxury of that. Our baseload foundation was broken in 2007. And
how was it broken?
By the energy scarcity. We always had a 15-20% margin.
Yes, on reserve margin.
A reserve margin. And around 2007, that reserve margin was depleted. And then we had a lot of wet weather and inclement weather, which wet all the coal, and it started the load shedding.
Okay. So wet coal was a problem, and is it still a continuing problem now?
Not really. I mean, a lot of work has been done around that. It was a particularly wet year, so it is something that we are dealing with and managing very well. But the energy shortage that we're experiencing in Eskom is really the availability of the plant. So it's not really the availability of the fuel supply. So we need to obviously look at how do we actually balance and bring in renewable energies responsibly by having sufficient baseload, mid-merit energy like gas turbines, which can come on and follow load and keep the energy demand and power in balance, supply and demand in balance. And that is use all the different types of technology to do that. One can't do it with gas alone, or with nuclear alone, or with coal alone, or renewables alone. You're going to have a balanced energy mix. And that third portfolio, splitting it up into 3 pies, is probably the best solution for South Africa at the moment. If we can get that strategy right, it's going to take a bit of time, especially for a nuclear build program. Those construction builds take about 8 years to build. We've got to go through a licensing process and a procurement process. So you're looking at a 10-year process before we're going to start seeing energy on the grid. But what do we do in the meantime? How do we balance our energy in the meantime? Gas can definitely play a major role. Renewables will play a role, and we need to obviously improve the performance of our coal until such time that we have a clean baseload solution, either from hydro or from nuclear energy in South Africa. The nice thing about nuclear energy, it can be built anywhere. Okay, so
what do you mean?
South Africa has a centralized grid.
Because historically, nuclear needed a lot of water.
Yeah.
And needed to be based on the ocean side.
Yes.
And then inland, you could only run a small, reactors that
Yeah.
were not in maximum demand, especially requiring cooling.
Yes.
So what has changed in that on the nuclear side?
Nuclear energy can be built anywhere. So South Africa has a centralized energy grid because we generated our energy mostly from coal, which came from the Mpumalanga region, the northwest region as well. So all the generation comes from the north, and we distribute the power through enormous grids,
Yes.
long distance grids throughout the rest of the country.
37,000 kilometers transmission lines.
Delivering power from Mpumalanga to Cape Town is like delivering power from Rome
Yeah,
to London.
absolutely.
That's crazy. It's unthinkable.
Totally so, yeah.
But that's how we do it in South Africa because of the design of the centralized grid back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, when we started building and expanding our energy capacity. So the nice thing about nuclear energy is you can build it really anywhere you want it. Large-scale reactors, as you've said, require a bit of cooling, so they are better located at the load centers on our coastal regions, like Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, or
Gqeberha,
yeah, or Durban.
Which is Port Elizabeth.
And we can definitely look at a large-scale nuclear reactor build there.
Yeah, there was a plan for Tainspin.
Tainspin, yeah.
Yeah, what happened with that plan? I mean, why is
It's
South Africa not
very
pursuing the
much there.
Tainspin? Because in the IRP, they say they are looking for an additional 2.5,
Yes.
2,500 megawatts.
Tainspin is still very
nuclear.
much there. And funny enough, interesting story about Tainspin, when they were building Koeberg in 1984 and 85, they commissioned those units. The next plant was going to be Tainspin.
Oh.
And guess what happened? Chernobyl happened in 1986.
Oh.
And that, like many situations, put a moratorium on future energy builds. So South Africa said, let's wait and see what the hell happens to Chernobyl. And that was, Tainspin was going to be the next build back then. And unfortunately, the situation in Chernobyl stopped the program. Otherwise, we would have had an identical power station to Koeberg at Tainspin.
Any practical reason why Tainspin was selected?
You don't select a nuclear site, randomly, So you got to look at the characterization of the site, all the aspects like seismic issues, the ocean, marine studies have got to be absolutely correct. You got to have a situation or found a nuclear power station on good ground. So they do tremendous amount of studies. They do IEAs, geotechnical studies, site characterization studies from a marine point of view, an environmental impact point of view. And Tainspin stood out as an ideal site there, and it still is a very good site for a nuclear build program. So the regulator, the National Nuclear Regulator, is in the process of doing the licensing for the Tainspin site. That has been done for the Danafontein site next to Koeberg. So what we've got is 2 shovel-ready sites in South Africa
On the nuclear build program.
which we can start construction of very, very, very quickly.
I want you to catch up on that just after the break when we return. I think coming back, based on the the discussion around the nuclear being one of the key areas now, which you're a spokesperson for the South African nuclear build program. How do we expedite the development of brand new nuclear assets, and what can be done with the current new technology, whether it is people-made modular reactors or it is the current industry, international modular reactors, SMR, small modular reactor technology. What can be done in that space?
All right, so we have a choice of technologies today. There's been the classical large-scale reactors that range from 1,000 megawatts to 1650 megawatts. So that's a big, large-scale reactor. One typically builds them in pairs on these various sites, and one can also build a whole fleet of them. Depends very much on your energy needs. Then, over the last decade, there's been a tremendous amount of development in the scaling down the size of the nuclear power plants to anything from 50 megawatts to 400 megawatts. And these are called small modular reactors.
So you can have a nuclear plant.
Yes.
Or a nuclear generation technology that starts at 50 megawatts to 450 or 600.
Yes. So South Africa, for example, spent quite a bit of time in the start of the century around the development of the pebble bed modular technology. And for some reason or other, we basically backed out of that. But we were definitely market world leaders in the development of small modular reactors here in South Africa. At the moment, we've lost the curve. The world has taken on this new technology, this scalable technology, modular technology, technology that can be built in a controlled environment and dispatched to site. And it does tick off a lot of the safety issues and the speed to market issues that typically large-scale reactors are challenged for.
So nuclear can be safe?
Oh, absolutely. Nuclear is safe.
So why is
Kuberg is very safe.
Yeah, but why is that the nuclear industry never says these things? We don't ever hear of nuclear safety anywhere from any nuclear practitioner in South Africa. They are most timid. I found the nuclear sector players extremely backward. I mean,
Yes.
I'm more friends with the renewables lobby guys in a sense that I can interact with them, whether we agree or disagree on certain fundamentals, because I'm much more on a renewable side.
Yeah.
Because I like efficiency, I like environmental friendliness, and I like the aspect of moving into the transition. Disruptive technology is good technology in any way, however viable it is as intermittent. But when you come to the fundamentals, the nuclear people in South Africa are so laid back, are like so uninterested in nuclear. Why is it? I mean, when there's so much of safety over the last few years.
Look, the nuclear industry is very confident and certain about their technology. We know.
Also, they're arrogant. Oh, I understand.
We know nuclear is safe. Okay. We may not necessarily broadcast it, but we know that it is safe.
But ordinary
Because of
people
the
don't know it does.
design systems. We do quite a lot of media, and in fact, you would pick up, if you have a look at what is the safest energy technology in the world, it will come up as nuclear. It is on the internet. It is well publicized.
It's my first time hearing it. But
And you would see coal, for example, would be the most dangerous one. And we're talking about fatalities per terawatt hour.
yeah.
So fatalities per amount of power generated. Coal is up there as a number as a world leader, and it tapers down. And at the end is nuclear.
Who's the middle?
You got gas, you got oil, you got hydro, and closer to nuclear is you got wind and solar. So wind and solar kill a lot more people per terawatt hour generated than nuclear does. And those are the facts of the industry. And unfortunately, it's not well publicized. Nuclear is controlled and managed by engineers, not by PR agents. So we focus on the technology, not on the public relations side. And we need to do, and you're absolutely correct, we need to be a little bit more out there and create some more education for the industry and for the public at large. Now, we've established, for that reason, we established the SA Nuclear Build platform, which really informs people on questions that you've just asked on the safety of nuclear energy. How does that actually work?
I want you to hold you on that thought as we return. Coming back on the aspect of the nuclear build program, what's a value chain? What is valuable in nuclear build program? What can industry lobby around in order to enable the production of nuclear?
Nuclear energy does offer a lot of scope for the South African industry, and going back to 2007, where we had the industry aligned with that program as well, there is a big focus on how does one optimize the local content of a nuclear build program, and government is very supportive of this process. The DTIC is looking into it, as they are looking at other industries as well. On a nuclear build program, and we're looking at maybe the 9.6 gigawatt program that was set aside by the Constitutional Court in 2018, that the local content of that build was around about 250 billion rand.
Economic value
for the local industry. That would have transformed the landscape of the construction industry, the manufacturing industry, the material supply industry, the engineering industry. It would have done a lot for our country.
Big steel producers,
yeah,
cement production,
every aspect, a broad panorama of our industry would have definitely been positively affected by that program itself. And these are the opportunities that gets me out of bed to make sure that the industry is optimally aligned for this program. As we're going through the tendering process, which will be later on this year, we need to keep the industry abreast of the opportunity and make sure the industry is properly prepared. And there is a big qualification program that goes in there. You don't say, listen, I would like to do some nuclear work because I know somebody. You've got to be qualified. You've got to have the capability, the competences and the capacity and the qualifications to participate in the nuclear industry. And it is achievable.
I'm going to hold you on that thought, because I think we need to have a follow-up program on how we can expand in terms of actually demystifying the issues and security concerns, including the environmental issues around nuclear. We know that there is currently, the Cape Town nuclear power station that is doing very well.
Yes.
But there are people who are saying it must be closed and they must put solar and wind on it. So we have to look at it very practically. I know there are emotions, but people don't understand the value. But it's been an incredible session sitting down with you. In the future, we're going to be picking up on the value chain and how ordinary South Africans can benefit.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your wonderful inputs and for coming on our show, Unscripted, OnSpot.
Adil, thank you very much.
It's been an honor and a pleasure.